The first time I watched Bo Burnham's Inside, I absolutely loved it. I was awed by his audacious use of light, music, and choreography, and I felt an identification with his feelings about life during COVID. The second time I watched it, it started to rub me the wrong way, as I wondered if it was doing for well-meaning liberals what Todd Phillips's Joker did for incels, by kind of just flaring up a lot of negative feelings, stirring existential dread, without any real release valve of hope or constructive notions of moving forward. Around the same time Inside was released, an up-and-coming filmmaker on YouTube, Joel Haver, hit my radar. By April of 2021, he had gone from having mere thousands of subscribers to 1 million in the span of 4 short months. I watched his COVID-era art film Pretend That You Love Me, and I became convinced he is one of the most exciting filmmakers working today. This video is going to discuss similarities and differences I perceive in the art-making philosophies of these two creators, and some thoughts I've been having about their bodies of work. Joel Haver's first feature film, We Are Sasquatch, is a mockumentary about a humanoid Bigfoot race of people that have integrated into society and participate in a town's shenanigans.
Sasquatches are hairy people.
Shot in his hometown of Belchertown, Massachusetts with friends and family, We Are Sasquatch demonstrates Haver's auspicious understanding of how the interests of different characters compete to create drama and comedy.
Have you ever heard the song Hairy Legs?
It's not really our type of music, you know?
Is gonna be in the Al's Steak Shack dance competition this year.
No, honey.
Whether a direct inspiration or not, some of the family kitchen table scenes are reminiscent of scenes from Zach Stone Is Gonna Be Famous.
You don't act or sing.
You don't even have hidden talent.
Compounding upon this point of conjunction, Haver would go on to shoot a series titled I'm Going to Be Famous in 2018. He credits Nathan For You as his direct inspiration for this series.
My web series I'm Going to Be Famous was very much inspired by Nathan For You.
31 Days in Marshall, North Carolina is Haver's first docufiction feature, where he works with Dylan Dexter and several non-actors they met in Marshall, North Carolina, playing loosely fictionalized versions of themselves for the movie. Here we start to see the emergence of Haver's affinity for not asking people to perform.
My process is so loose it pretty well just lets people be themselves.
But it is presented very effectively still with the aesthetics of a fiction piece. They aren't making a documentary. Characters have conversations in shot reverse format, and it gives the feel of early mumblecore works like Kentucker Audley's Team Picture. Is this film appropriative of a town and culture to which they are outsiders? Perhaps, but it really doesn't feel exploitative. On May 30th, 2022, Bo posted the Inside outtakes on his channel, and I noticed a comment from John Green. Inside is such a deeply generous, funny, and wrenching account of the early pandemic, and from the beginning, no one has charted the nature of fame in our age like Burnham. I was a little bit confounded by the first part of his comment. In some ways, Inside actually struck me as ungracious and roundly pessimistic about our world.
Can any single person shut the fuck up about any single thing for an hour?
But I think there's a difference between being artistically generous and offering up the bounty of his creativity, and being ideologically generous in making space for people to have different ideas and express them. The special seems entrenched in distinctly progressive dread that we've done things so wrong up to this point, there may not be much we can do to affect change or better the world beyond this point.
20,000 years of this, 7 more to go.
And in a world with this level of environmental, bodily, and mental health damage, many of us resonate with this feeling of just wanting to end things. But does making art that stews about in it promote this sense of dread within society at large? This is a question that comes up virtually every time a show or movie about suicide gets serious viewership. When 13 Reasons Why was released on Netflix, the National Institute of Mental Health issued a press release suggesting the show was associated with a 28.9% increase in suicide rates among U.S. youth ages 10 to 17 in the month April 2017. If releasing art about suicide can influence rates of suicide in a population, this would seem like something to give serious consideration to in making the decision to publish such a work or not. Perhaps Burnham would suggest that this piece is just holding up a mirror to society and himself to honestly reflect these feelings as they already exist within the world. And I can personally identify with how working through these kinds of feelings in art can be deeply cathartic, from the perspective of the artist at least.
To distract me from wanting to put a bullet into my head.
I think it's less clear that it's beneficial for the audience, especially where it discourages human connection.
Real world, human to human tactile contact will kill you.
And sharing one's own interior thoughts.
Can any single person shut the fuck up about any single thing?
See, part of what I disagree with about this bit so vehemently is more people are making creative things now than ever. More people know that they can make creative things now, and one of the ways that these works get recognition in a hyper-saturated market is by other people sharing thoughts about them on the internet. That's not an inherently bad thing. That gives people incentive to create. He knows this. He knows that one of the most devastating things is when nobody cares about the thing you made.
That's the fear, is that you will not be paid attention to, not that you'll be hated.
No one gives a shit what we think.
And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm commenting on this stuff. I'm putting these ideas in conversation with one another, where ordinarily I would be swayed by expressions of this kind of cynicism.
You're not shutting the fuck up right now.
Burnham has clearly habituated to a practice he's comfortable with, but seems to forget that it takes courage for people to make things. And people can be easily discouraged.
And that's true.
Of course, there's a level at which he's joking about this stuff, but viewing the special as an exemplar of post-ironic voice, there's certainly also truth expressed here, which is what makes the jokes actually meaningful. Connecting with fellow humans, sharing our interior thoughts, these are hallmarks of the human experience, and not things that we can be content to just give up on. How responsible for the after effects of their artistic statement is the artist? Bo seems content to meditate on the problem without offering any solutions.
How do you suppose we make this better?
I don't know. I'm only trying to be like a diagnostic, not the word that means solving the disease.
In his art and in interviews throughout his career, Bo has offered a lot of pretty direct discouragement from others following his path.
Okay, I had a privileged life, and I got lucky, and I'm unhappy. I know very little about anything, but what I do know is that if you can live your life without an audience, you should do it.
You gotta just take a deep breath and give up.
And he says these things because he understands the perils of performing to an audience all the time. But he has also benefited from this being his life. What I find most problematic about this discouraging stance he takes is the idea that young people would view his work and think they can simply substitute watching him for having their own relationship and engagement with an instrument, or the camera, or any of these art forms. The optics of this become even more perverse as Bo uses imagery to deify himself on screen. He knows he's good at what he does, and he doesn't think that you should try to emulate him. Does he see himself as a Christ figure?
Oh, every day I'd be like, how am I so good? No.
If we delve deeper into Bo's ideology, we can see that part of what complicates this message and makes him interesting as a media figure are the contradictions in his feelings and beliefs about the question of when one should contribute a verse. There are places where he actually does encourage people to make things.
Be like creators, you know what I mean? Like we can feel that and celebrate that because it's good to create.
It's great to create, but it's also great to feel like the destruction of creation.
Yeah.
You know, to feel like the emotional recompense of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes this comes across as glib and unserious.
How about I sit on the couch and I watch you next time?
But still, this makes it harder to read his discouragement of others making art for an audience as totally straightforward. Taking a little time to feel sorry for myself is Haver's film school Christmas movie that's not really a Christmas movie. Think Die Hard. Go. Eyes wide shut. The movie tells the story of Bud, a young guy living in New York City who is going through a breakup and not handling it especially well. His only feature shot with the script to date, it tries to present in the perfect, polished style Joel would go on to decry as unhelpful for young filmmakers to attempt to evoke.
Trying to be perfect. They're like you know, expensive. They got all the lighting and they got the perfect dolly shot. That's not interesting anymore. We have that. You lose sleep and you waste people's time. You waste your own time. Those films, they're laced with these anxieties because of all that time and pressure you put on it to be perfect. So the imperfect, ugly thing is better.
Its dynamic camera doesn't always have the smoothest movement, but you can see Haver in the grip of the learning curve with his formal choices. Likewise, the ability for its young cast members to connect with a reality behind their lines is hit or miss. But the plot takes some fun, clever detours into Fight Club land.
Hit me on the ear, man!
And lays the groundwork for more consummate flirtation Haver would exemplify in Pretend That You Love Me.
Without the speed valve, it'd be worth like $5.
The speed valve's everything.
No.
No.
Haver's sixth feature, Forget About Everything for a While, also addresses the jealousy and confusion of a relationship's end, a common theme in his work. It embraces its indie aesthetic, but Haver's proficiency with the camera is noticeably improved. Improvised between its two-man cast, it takes on tones of a psychological thriller and relaxes its grip on logic, almost like a casually dressed male black swan. When Burnham put out Welcome to the Internet on YouTube, I noticed Joel Haver had commented on it. Bo, you're terrific. Keep pursuing whatever creative endeavors you want, please, for everyone's sake. I hope this special inspires people to push themselves and realize the full potential of their creativity, because the only difference between any average Joe and you is practice. Much love. Less than 3. This comment struck me as odd at the time because while everything Joel wrote accords nicely with his own artistic philosophy, I hadn't heard Bo say anything to this effect. After further digging, this was the closest thing.
You are a director. You are an actor. You're not aspiring. You know, it really isn't. You maybe aspire to be a famous one or a successful one. Don't have shame about that stuff.
I almost felt like Joel was implying a greater overlap in their artistic philosophies than was true. Of course, there are a lot of noticeable similarities between the two creators. Some of these similarities present themselves quite superficially. Incidentally, they both grew up in suburban spaces in Massachusetts.
A tiny town in Massachusetts.
They're both white.
I'm a special kind of white guy.
They're both male. Both came up on YouTube. Some of their artistic similarities seem to run a little deeper. Both made solitary COVID-era art.
This is the island I built. It's all built out of cut-up cardboard, and this island is so tiny. What do I do? I'm like, let's build little puppets to make a film alone. Like I did everything. What value is there in this masochistic, lonely act? It's like torturing myself. I'm stuck inside every day, filming alone. I'm like, what value is there? And then there's these calls from the outside world.
Both like to depict male sensitivity on screen. I feel like the fact that Bo hides his face in his hands makes this moment much more obviously a formal construction and not something that happened spontaneously. I've come into contact with people, even film and theater students, who seemed fully under the spell and almost naive to the fact that the special is a filmic construction. You know, by virtue of it being a film, we know on some level it was constructed, whether it was staged with precision or some of it captured spontaneously and then constructed further through editing after the fact. These things are designed to look unmediated, but that doesn't mean this actually all happened this way, irrespective of the camera's presence. That's the magic of movies. It can make it look like someone had an experience that they didn't actually have. But I digress. They both like to depict male sensitivity on screen. They both make media that is highly self-conscious, through which they build meta-narratives about themselves as creators.
While also performing a show that is meta-criticizing yourself in real time as a performer. He acts in some of my films. I make short films on YouTube.
And I think that, if I'm self-aware about being a douchebag, it'll somehow make me less of a douchebag. But it doesn't. Self-awareness does not absolve anybody of anything. Am I balding?
And they both have a tendency to let their actors simply be themselves.
My process is so loose, it pretty well just lets people be themselves.
Telling the kids, like,
don't act.
Yeah, just be you. Like, show me. Yeah. Show us what it means. You know what it means to be 13. We don't.
I will not be summarizing a simple smash and bash job gone wrong.
So you say that for the last 5 weeks, you haven't been in or out of the bathroom in the McDonald's.
You'll just have to watch that one. Pretend That You Love Me is a stunning provocation of truly independent filmmaking. A docufiction film that tells a story of Joel's struggles with loneliness, back issues, his father dying of cancer, pity, puppy love, and where boundaries may or may not exist in artistic collaborative relationships. At this point in his practice, the formal choices he makes with his camera and lighting are very purposeful. As an actor, he's visibly more at ease surrendering to the moment and playing in different phases of text and metatext. With only Drowning in Potential perhaps on a par, it is his film most poised to say something, and the statement is deeply and vulnerably personal. While it presents as a decidedly more problematic work than Inside, it offers some semblance of emotional redemption in the end. Hope collected on false pretenses.
I'll let the mystery live on because the tension and the discomfort and not knowing is so much more powerful than if I were to alleviate that or if I were to confirm that.
Alright, let's finally examine some of the key differences between these creators. Joel seems emphatically of the persuasion that the things he has discovered in this art form are things that anyone can discover, and he spreads the word of the beauty and magic of filmmaking to try to make it available to as many people as possible.
Wow. Isn't it amazing seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes? That's the power of movies. Should be done by everyone, and everyone is doing it. And I think this pretension that what makes a film, and people will tell you, well, you need a crew, you need this. It's a moving image displayed in any way. It's all I really ever wanted to do was to show people they could make stuff. So thank you guys so much.
As we've seen, Burnham seems less sold on this idea.
The system is rigged against you. Your hard work and talent will not pay off.
If you can live your life without an audience, you should do it.
Haver is content to make work as an independent creator and is highly skeptical of industry, the festival circuit, and film school.
The young people of today have such potential to be brilliant, but they are being led by cowards with no sense of responsibility, by corporations with no sense of creativity. Film school to me is kind of this pipeline to pump you into this industry. The only path to achieve that value they give you is submit it to festivals. Of course they're gonna get rejected. This industry that exists kind of to discourage people. They want to have your premiere status, but I'm at a point in my career where I could get a budget. I could easily secure funding for $100,000, $1 million movie. I could get distribution. It's so ridiculous we say low budget when something costs $1 million. I'm still doing it to make a point, and that's that this is a valid form of filmmaking. Doesn't have to be tied to expense. Not only do I think it's a way to make films, I think it's the best way to make films. I'll avoid becoming too anti-corporate conspiratorial in this rant. One day you'll get to make your movie. Oh, you just be a grunt and work your ass off and be a PA, and the system is not designed to accommodate you. It's designed to use you and abuse you. That's why I've turned down several offers to make TV shows, because YouTube is where I love. You don't make a TV show and inspire people to make a TV show. It's like the American dream. Oh, I hope I can make a TV show one day, but what I'm doing you could do today.
He presents the internet, YouTube in particular, as a solution to some of these other problematic institutions.
The alternative is so much more freeing. I don't give a damn about A24, Neon, Annapurna. They're corporations too, they're just better at lying about it.
By contrast, Beau's only feature film endeavor was made under the auspices of A24. So you'll notice here that Burnham is very successful. We know this because he's surrounded by fancy technical toys that Netflix paid for. When he talks about finishing the special, he refers euphemistically to, I'll have to just live my life.
And that means I have to just live my life.
He's a multimillionaire. What does this look like for him? He's not working a day job. He criticizes capitalism and donates and encourages people to donate and jokes about not doing it.
Should I give away my money? No.
Clearly he has benefited from capitalism and wants to talk about it. And he's not so quick to brush aside some of the things that make YouTube itself problematic.
I was a child. Yeah, in hindsight, it just seems absolutely insane and invasive and strange, but it didn't feel like that at the time. It felt exciting. Soon after I posted my first couple of videos, they went viral.
And I know YouTube is still a corporation, and you know, there's still that gray area where it's like, okay, you're still supporting Google, that's not that good, but for the time being, YouTube is the best place because you can make stuff yourself, release it yourself. Where else could I get 100,000 views in the first day on a $0 movie? That wouldn't happen anywhere, you know?
Joel encourages people toward quantity and finishing work.
People are like, you gotta do quality over quantity. They sit on a film forever because they're like, well, this isn't perfect, this isn't how I envisioned it. If you put out too much, it's gonna look bad. Who gives a fuck? Just put out stuff, just make stuff, because you're gonna get quality through quantity. And then when you make something, it becomes a lot easier to make something else and then make something else. And each something else gets better and better, and you get a handle on the craft, you start to develop your voice. Things don't have to be perfect anymore. Things could be flawed, and things could be even rushed in some ways, you know, to me to like get it out. And this quantity-driven platform where you're always creating something else.
This reminds me a lot of a phrase my high school film teacher, Kevin Fitzpatrick, would often say to temper my perfectionism. He'd tell me, done is better than good. I've also heard, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
I don't think the best thing it can be is the perfect thing.
Bo is himself a perfectionist and is wary of the current YouTube regime, urging young creators toward quickly producing high volumes of mediocre content.
I don't want to look back and say, you have to dig through all this crap to find the stuff I really cared about. You know, you have to look through all these videos I made every day and all this stuff in order to I don't want it to be like that. Long-term work, things that take a long time, usually have a longer shelf life and are more impactful. And I worry that like my generation is being encouraged to, rather than spend a year on something and release something that is good and polished, you're required every week to put something out there, and it never accumulates into something substantial. You just have like sort of an IV drip of mediocre art.
In some ways, Haver presents as an advocate for the destruction of classist, capitalist paradigms of the filmic medium.
It is time to stop following, because the fact of the matter is no one knows what they're doing, so you might as well dare to act like you do.
But counterintuitively, he's successfully inculcated himself into a status class of filmmakers by boldly speaking out on these different topics. And he seems to regard himself as deserving of the attention he's earned. Haver takes credit for his triumphs.
It feels like something I've been building up to. I feel like for a long time I've been kind of making this back catalog of great stuff, and you know, I had a lot of times where I kind of got down on myself. I was kind of like, dang it, I'm making all this great shit and no one's watching, but I kept doing it, and I'm like, someday it will explode, people will stumble upon it. And I guess this week was that day.
Burnham cynically abstracts away any responsibility for his success and attributes it to privilege and luck.
We're tall white guys. We overcame nothing to be here. There was nothing standing in our way, and we barely got here.
You know what? I shot mine 8K and cheated all the time. Digital pushes all over the place, reframing. I mean, it was my first movie. I was giving myself as much help as I could get. And, I could have shot it better. No, I could've, Okay.
This is part of Burnham's disarming progressivism that enables him to sensitively participate in telling stories of perspectives other than his own. He's a champion of female stories and perspectives in particular.
I was told very often that I was like a comedian only for 13-year-old girls, and like, fuck yeah, I am. You know what I mean? I feel really proud of that. And I feel, really, they deserve to be paid attention to and to be taken seriously.
Joel has up to this point leaned into telling stories from a male perspective, usually very consistent with his own experience. In Drowning in Potential, his first feature since leaving his hometown in a van to travel around the country,
I did it! I got my van!
Joel teams up with Dax Flame to meditate on some of the difficulties young people face in establishing themselves working in entertainment, and how the male role models of the past don't seem to fit Generation Z and young millennials comfortably. One thing I haven't yet touched on is Joel Haver's promise.
I have this promise. I say, if you make a movie and send it to me, I will watch it. And when I say a movie, I mean a feature-length movie, 40 minutes and up.
On November 13, 2021, I sent Joel a mumblecore feature my friends and I made. Joel hasn't reached back out about our movie just yet. In fairness, it hasn't been a full year, and on the About page of his channel, he is clear on the fact that it may take him months or a full year to get around to watching any film sent to him. Is this a reasonable promise to hold him to at all? It sounds very utopian and a little naive. It's natural that his success would develop into an obstacle to him being able to deliver on this promise as more and more people vie for his attention. But that's a good problem for him to have. Between his promise and his van trip around the country, there's a lot that Joel has done for his image up to this point, possibly without being conscious of it, that has turned him into a perfect figurehead for a movement of these kinds of creators. Where he will take this role next remains to be seen. I see myself in both of these creators, and I see them in me. I see commonalities that manifest in superficial ways. Incidentally, I drive the same old tan Toyota Corolla that Joel drove in his old films. I also see their influence in the art that I've been making. I resonate with many of the thoughts and feelings they've shared. I definitely have worked through a lot of my own existential dread in my art. On some of these issues, I'm still figuring where I stand, and my exposure to both of these creators has pushed me to engage my critical faculties and actually think about the media landscape today and how we can best respond to it. On other issues, I have a very clear idea of where I stand, and know that I have a different perspective altogether from both of them, and I'm still navigating when and how to share my thoughts, and where to reserve comment, where it's more powerful to leave topics unaddressed and questions unanswered.
I don't like when artists talk about what their art means. You know, it takes away the power for the audience to have their own equally valid interpretation of the work.
In any case, I'm proud to think of these artists as my contemporaries. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to figure out how to get myself off this island.
What do you think?